listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. I want to start off again by thanking you guys for all the listener suggestions. If you go to our website, hazardground.com, by the way, the website new and improved. Hope you guys really like it. But if you go to our website, hazardground.com, click on the Contact Us tab. People have been giving us write-in suggestions for future guests, and they have been awesome. So we certainly appreciate you guys helping to grow this show and helping to become part of it by suggesting some stories that you think the rest of the world should hear, and we certainly love telling them. So again, continue the suggestions through our website, hazardground.com. Also on our website, our partnership with Amazon, we tell you about it every week, and it certainly is working. Go to our website, hazardground.com. You have to go there to be part of this partnership, but click on that Amazon button at the bottom of the page. Do your normal shopping. We'll get a percentage of whatever you guys spend, and we donate it right back to some of the amazing charities that you've heard featured right here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Keep up with the show. Again, tell us what you like, what you don't like. Also, leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. Those are certainly helping to grow this show in ways that you guys can't imagine. Doesn't have to be a lengthy review, just something quick. Let us know what you like about the show. And then, of course, tell a friend. Tell people about the podcast. That's the best way to get this thing spread around to everybody that you know, is to tell them that you listen, tell them why it's great, and have them become a follower and a listener as well. Now that all that's out of the way, an amazing episode in store. Here we go. Joining us now is a retired E5 Army sergeant who worked in Explosive Ordnance Disposal as a bomb tech, and she lost both of her arms when diving on an explosive to save her fellow teammates. And yes, she is a female bomb tech, and I bring that up because there aren't many of them in EOD. She is Mary Dague, joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Mary, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
As I said, I did want to highlight the fact that you are a female. And because, look, EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, is not a field that is necessarily littered with a lot of females. So I definitely think it's noteworthy to bring that up and address that. And I do want to talk about sort of that environment and what it was like being a female in that environment. And obviously, you know, totally. you are putting your life or continuing to put your life back together after losing both arms in Iraq. We'll get to that as well. But I want to start out at the very beginning. How and why did you join the Army?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so I grew up in a really small town in Montana, and I got engaged right out of high school. And consequently, I gave up my chance to go to college. So I was working a lot of odd jobs, you know, being a maid, a busser, a waitress. And my fiance's mother, who had raised and helped raise 14 kids, one day it was just really nonchalantly, we were making dinner, and she said something, and I was fussing about not being able to do something properly, and she just threw it out. She was like, "Oh, don't worry. I'm going to train you to be the perfect housewife." And a little voice in my head was like, get out now. So I ran. Like, I just had this, you know, vision of my life ahead of me with 14 kids later. Like, no, I can't. Like, that is a lot of work. And I ran off and joined the Army.
Now, what year was this?
About 2 weeks later. This was in 2004.
Okay, so Afghanistan had kicked off, Iraq had kicked off. None of that bothered you or scared you?
No, not really. I was invincible. I was 19.
Well, that's true. Aren't we all at that age?
Right.
Now, did you have any idea? Yeah. Did you have any idea about the military? Did you know anybody in the military, or were you just going into this blind?
Oh, no, my dad was a Vietnam vet in the Air Force. He was a fixed-wing mechanic. So I knew, you know, and he was very supportive, but at the same time, he was worried because when he came back, you know, from Vietnam, they were not treated well. You know, He was getting balloons filled with piss thrown at him. Oh, wow. You know, called a baby killer. He was a mechanic. You know. And here I was volunteering.
Did he ever tell you about any of his experiences over there?
Not at the time. My dad was always very stoic. He was also a cop for 18 years. He's, to this day, still the most patient man I've ever known in my life.
Wow.
But he just never shared. I think the first time we actually started talking about it was when I came home on mid-tour leave. We went to the bar, we sat down, and man, my dad drinks wild turkey on the rocks. I tried to hang.
Nice.
I can't hang.
Not a bourbon fan?
I love bourbon. Not like that, though.
Yeah, well, wild turkey will put a little bit extra, hair in places in your body it's not supposed to. So,
it's true.
It has that effect on people. All right. So, but let me just ask you, when he started telling you some of this stuff, what were you thinking and feeling? What was your reaction?
I was still a teenager, so I was a little bit dumb and naive and thought I knew everything. But at the same time, when after 9/11, the country is probably the most united I've ever seen it in my life, to this day. And there was a whole lot of love for the troops, so talking to my dad, I'm like, Dad, I don't think it's the same as it was when you were in. They don't do that anymore.
Right.
It's kind of odd when you think of the dynamic. Back in Vietnam, people were drafted. They didn't have a choice unless they ran, and then they were called a coward. And so people were forced to go to war, and they come home, they're treated like shit. And then, our era, we're all volunteer. We ought to go, and people are hailing us as heroes. It's a really odd dynamic how it switched like that.
Was your dad drafted, or he actually signed up to go?
Actually, he signed up. He jokes that he dodged the draft by signing up.
Listen, Mary, it's not an uncommon thought. We've had a lot of Vietnam vets who have said the same thing. I signed up so I wouldn't be drafted, and in the hopes that they could sort of control somewhat of their fate of their service. Mm-hmm. And obviously, it never worked out for anybody because of the nature of that war. But there were some people who believed in that, and it wasn't a necessarily odd thought process by any stretch. But let's get back to you. So you're getting set to head off to basic. What do you know at this point? Anything? What did your dad tell you?
He just told me to shut up and look straight ahead. No matter what they're yelling at me, just block it out. Whatever they say, just say yes, drill sergeant. And just look straight ahead. Never look at them in the eye. Like, okay. And he's like, you're going to be yelled at more than you've ever been yelled at. And we didn't even. Well, I should preface this. When I went to MEPS, I went with the intention of either going into military intelligence or into like an MP or something that I can get into the CID field, because my dad, he's, like I said, he's a cop, and I kind of wanted to go into criminal investigation. So in my head, and I was completely wrong, but at the time I thought that would link me into the civilian world if I got out. But when I got to MEPS, they didn't have a slot for females for either of those jobs. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, what the hell does my plumbing have to do with it? Like, if this job is open, why can't I have it? But apparently it was some sort of quota. So then they go down the list and they get to Explosive Ordnance Disposal. And I asked the dude, I'm like, what's that, like the bomb squad? And he got all preachy with me, and he's like, no, it's Explosive Ordnance Disposal. It's the fucking bomb squad. Sorry.
It is. That's exactly what it is, yes.
Yeah, it is. So I called my dad from MEPS. I'm like, hey, so I got my job. He's like, oh, you get military intelligence? I'm like, no. Oh, so you got MP? I'm like, oh, no, I took EOD, and it's and my dad goes, I know what it is. Don't tell your mother. Like, okay.
That's awesome. But did you?
So we didn't talk about what I was going to do until after I graduated basic and went off to AID.
Okay, but so what about EOD excited you, and what about that? Was there anything particular in the Army about the whole thing that turned you onto it?
Yeah, actually. So when they were, telling me, it's like they went through the entire list of jobs, and like at one point they were like, petroleum supply. I'm like, I'm not pumping gas for you, dude. Right. And then they get to EOD and ask them if they had a video. So they run through this video. I don't know, I had this image of myself in like a, superhero cape billowing in the wind. Like, yeah, I can go in, I can save lives, not be stuck in an office or a building all day. It's always changing. I'm still going to get to solve puzzles like I was hoping for, and working like homicide or forensics. And it is absolutely transferable into the civilian world.
Sure.
So it just seemed like everything I wanted, and the whole idea of explosives and everything was never anything that scared me. It just seemed like it'd be fun.
As I said earlier, there weren't a lot of females in that field. Did you know that going in? Did any of that deter you? Did any of that motivate you?
I don't think I ever really considered that. I've always been of a mindset, both my parents always kind of raised me to, there's one standard for people.
Right. And
you should always strive for the standard. So to me, I didn't understand why there was segregation at all. So like, I remember when they were like, oh, females can't be in the infantry. I was like, but why? It's, and I understand more now, but as a kid, that wasn't anything that ever deterred me. And then when I got to EOD school, it's, EOD has been joint or I guess, what's it called?
No, joint is right.
Co-gender?
Yeah, no, well, it's been co-gender, but joint in a sense where, the Marines have EOD, the Army has EOD, and the Air Force has EOD. I mean, a lot of these different forces all go to the same spot to get the same training for their particular
branches. We all do phase one,
right?
Our phase one is always somewhere different, but then phase two is down at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And once I got there, it was, everybody is so used to working outside of the same structure of their military branch,
right, sure,
that being a female wasn't disparaged. You weren't looked down on. The only time you were ever looked down on is if you tried to flirt with an instructor or something, as you should be.
Right.
Like don't go into an MOS where people's lives are literally in your hands and try to flirt your way through it.
Bad philosophy. Noted. Got it.
Yep.
but to that end, I mean, did you ever look around in class and go, I'm the only girl here?
Yeah. Yeah. It was, but at the time, I was very adaptable. Like even now, I just kind of, whatever group I get thrown in with, like, okay, I guess I'm going to become what you need.
Right.
So I will say that because I was 19 and came to Florida, 20 when I got here, I went a little crazy, especially like clubs and stuff. Coming from Montana, there's no clubs in Montana.
Right.
So I had my crazy years. I like to call it the beginning of my stupid years. But I never let it affect my job. I didn't try to like date around. I actually tried to date a few civilians, and I learned very fast that being a female in the Army is intimidating enough. But being a female on the bomb squad is way more intimidating to civilian dudes. So I didn't have any lasting relationships or anything. And that was the only time that it ever felt like I was different because of what I did.
Okay. And again, I'm just...
Does that make sense?
No, it does. I was just curious about the dynamic. Sometimes it happens in specialized environments like this. Really the whole gender bias or the gender situation goes out the window just because, one, everybody is laser focused on a very difficult task. And two, because it's so, it's such a small group, really the effort and the work speak for itself. Like no one's going to look at you sideways if you're the best bomb disabler in the room. It doesn't matter whether you're a girl or a guy. People know that person knows how to do this better than I do, and it doesn't matter if it's a girl or not. So I just, in certain, areas of the Army, when you talk about pilots and stuff, I think it's different because we've had a bunch of pilots on and female pilots on the podcast, and it's a different world for them because you know how pilots act, and some of this is stereotyping, but male pilots, they all think they're Tom Cruise and Top Gun.
Cocky.
And
I'm going to say it right now.
And so
they're cocky.
Yeah, and so when there are females in there, it's just like, you can't do what I can do, and it's a lot wider, broader field. But again, in your field, it's simply, if this person can disable a bomb, they're of great use to me. So I was just curious how it was for you.
I will say I wasn't treated different per the job. But when I was out with the unit, like we would go on training missions, essentially where we'd be out of state, gone for 2-3 weeks doing pre-deployment training. And the few times we got to go out was when I noticed it the most. But if I dressed like a girl outside, it was like completely different. The guys even told me, like, you look like a girl. It's weird. And but then they would get very protective.
Sure.
Like, I'd be out and doing my thing, cutting a rug, and they're like, that guy's getting too close to you. Or they would just start getting bigger around other dudes. Like, what are you doing with our little sister?
Right. Makes sense.
But that was the most of the dynamic. I did have one E7 who I butted heads with constantly because he tried to treat me different. And my commander, the first day I walked in, I was the first female in my unit. So they were, they were used to, good old boy system, just a guys club, And so I was the first one there, and I knew that was going to change the dynamic just initially. So I went in, with like, I'm just going to show these guys I'm one of the guys. I'm here to do a job. I'm not here to do anything but my job. And very first meeting with the commander, he pulls me in and he's like, well, you're the first woman we've had, and we're not going to play any more grab ass. There's not going to be sexist jokes, no more swearing, no more this. I'm like, please, sir, please stop. Please no, don't do that. Like that will just make them hate me to begin with. That is me so much worse than what I'm already working with.
Right.
He's like, no, they're going to have to learn this is the way it's going to be. Like, no, it's not. It's really not. Like, seriously, I swear a lot, and I tell some of the dirtiest jokes. So I'm like, please don't do that. So, of course, he goes out, and I got there on a Friday, so they're doing their weekend safety brief. And he briefs all of them on that.
Are you there when he briefs them?
I'm looking around this room. Yeah, I'm standing right there. He introduces me and then starts telling all the changes that are happening because of me. Like, he even frames it like that. Well, but now because we got a female here, there'll be no more of this. We're not going to have any more of this. I'm like, oh God. And they're staring daggers at me. I've essentially kicked in the door to their home and shit on their rug. I'm like, hey guys, I'm here. Awesome. So
did you have to kind of go
up telling a sexist joke?
Oh, I was going to say in the room at that same time?
Yeah, at the same time. Commander hated me, but I never had a problem working with any of the guys after that.
All right, well, now you got to tell me, what was the joke?
Oh, so I'm going to get lit up for this, because just remember, if anybody's listening, this was not the times.
Right.
Or was the time. It was funny. Anyway, I was like, so...
By the way, what year is this?
This was 2005.
Okay, so we were funnier back then.
Yes.
Okay.
We were not held back.
Go ahead. Lay it on me.
Like, oh man, I'm going to get flamed. I'm just saying. Okay. So it was like, sir, he prompted me. He's like, is there anything you'd like to address that I've forgotten? And I was like, yes, sir, I'd actually like to speak something that's very important and near and dear to me. And I think it's something that everyone, male and female, should know. And of course, everybody's like looking around like, And I'm like, well, I'll start with a hypothetical. What would be the first thing that any woman anywhere should do when she gets out of a battered wives shelter? And they all look at me and I'm like, the dishes, if she knows what's good for her. So they laugh. Commander hates me. But now the guys know that I'm like, this is not about me. This is about him. I'm like...
Man, I mean, listen, that is not funny in 2019, but back then it was funny. And listen, but and I say that tongue in cheek, and that's more about a sign of the times. But in all seriousness, given what you were put up against, I understand the decision that you made. I understand why you did it, and while the joke is inappropriate on the surface, and it's not, domestic violence is nothing to laugh about. I think we all can agree on that. And let's just kind of go a little bit PC here for the audience. No one is saying that it's anything to make a joke at or anything, but the only way to cut the tension in that room for yourself and kind of relieve some of the pressure that was now put on you was to let everybody know, hey, I'm okay. I can handle myself. I'm an adult. It doesn't matter that I'm a female. I'm one of you guys, and we're all doing the same job in the same unit together. And I think, I would think that they would have respected you a little bit for that.
I think so. And it was one of those things, like in my head, I'm like, I had to do something that would be against what the commander is telling them, just to, at the very least, to show those guys that is not a decision I support. Right. Like, maybe I'm going to get written up for it, but whatever. I don't have to work with the commander. I have to work with you.
Right, sure. Okay, so you get to your unit, and it's 2005, and obviously all this is going on. How quickly are you in train-up mode for deployment? And, I caveat this by telling the audience, remember, there are not a lot of EOD units through all the forces, Army, Marines, Air Force. There's just not enough units for the amount of roadside bombs that are running around in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is a highly important job, and the necessity of it is uber important to the troops on the ground. And so how quickly does all the train up start for you, and how quickly do you get to your first deployment?
Immediately. We started spinning up right away. We were in kind of a flux time in EOD, where EOD used to be very small. When I first got to the unit, it was only a 13-man unit. And that included our supply tech, our admin clerk, our mechanic, and our chem guy.
And those are people who didn't touch bombs, by the way.
Yeah, no.
They never touch bombs.
Their own MOS. They are not EOD.
Nope.
But during that time, we had about a year before the deployment. During that time, they bulked us up to 44 man. So we added an extra supply tech, another mechanic, 2 more admin clerks, 1 or 2 more, and then a couple more ops guys. So the ops guys are EOD, but they're 7s, and they're only going to get pulled down to missions if it's necessary, if we're low manned. So we were operating in 3 to 4 man teams. So most of my year there before the deployment was spent integrating, learning the ins and outs. We did a couple pre-deployment trainings that were meant to give us the feel for the op tempo, and for the type of situations we would be facing once we got to Iraq. So it was pretty intense. But in that year, we built up some really indestructible relationships.
During this train-up process, how confident are you growing, not only in your ability about the job that you have to do, but in your entire team's ability to do the job?
My team, I was always very confident in. My team leader, Bruce, the dude has 1,000-pound head. Like, he's a genius. At the same time, he's also very chill. Like, he's not a dude who's going to yell at you if you screw up. He's just going to tell you what you did wrong and then make you work through it until you get it right. So he was such a blessing to have, especially because growing up in EOD, I became very opinionated and very loud. And so I was kind of the hothead on the team, and Bruce was the one who would reel me back.
Right.
And then Mick, my teammate, he is incredibly intelligent when it comes to being a bomb tech. Doesn't make the best life decisions ever, but he's a phenomenal bomb tech, and I never had any doubts about him or his abilities or anything. So our team, I was very confident in. I knew what I was doing. However, three months before the deployment, I got pulled aside and basically told, like, hey, by the end of this deployment, you're going to be a team leader. We're grooming you. You're going to be doing a lot of OJT. I had to finish certifications. They wanted me to get promoted in Iraq. Like, they had a plan that by the end of that deployment, I was going to be a team leader. And I was very much fighting that plan.
Why?
Because I wanted at least one deployment under my belt as a team member before I even approached becoming a team leader.
So one where you're actually the one in the bomb suit, going out there, taking the bomb apart.
No, that's the team member or the team leader that does that.
Okay, all right.
The team leader is the one doing all the craziness. Team members are the ones prepping the shots, driving the truck, setting the grids. We're doing a lot of the communication.
Okay, so this is kind of one of those necessary groundwork kind of jobs to set you up for success next time.
Exactly. You have to have a slot as a team member before you go into being a team leader, because it's where you get all the experience. You're learning by watching and doing with somebody who already has that experience.
Right.
And in being on the, in EOD in a war like this, where ordnance is extremely heavy, it's used absolutely everywhere. It's like a game of chess. Right. And if you're not learning from somebody else, you're trying to be self-taught against people who've been learning from somebody else for decades. You're going to die.
And just one other note, it's not just defusing roadside bombs. It's the weapon caches that they were finding, weekly that had to be disposed of that you guys were in charge of. So there's a lot of different jobs at play. All right, so you're getting to this first deployment, and they're telling you that you're going to be groomed as a team leader. But when you actually get on this first deployment, what is your job? What are you told? Where are you going? Give me the background.
This deployment, I was what we coined as a senior team member. So my team, one other team, we got fragged out to Liberty Victory. And what that means is the rest of our unit went to Tague, but 2 teams went to Liberty Victory to support 2-5 Cav. So we are operating not without support, but not with our unit there. Our XO came with us. We had one ops guy and a supply person.
So tell me about that first deployment. What'd you learn? Like, what'd you take away from it?
Oh man, I had this idea going into it that all I was going to see was the evil. I was going to war. I wasn't going to see families and kids and dogs and, towns. I mean, I knew I was in the back of my head, but I just prepared to see the worst of the worst. And I got there and, we're setting up schools and little makeshift hospitals. And, the general is bringing us out there because he wants to go have tea with the locals and Hearts and Minds. And it was way different than I expected war to be.
What about from the EOD portion of it, as far as the bomb work and everything?
Oh God, so much.
Do you remember the first bomb that you were part of taking apart?
Taking apart?
Well, diffusing, I mean,
no.
or detonating.
I remember the very first incident I went on. They sent me on an incident as a ride-along. We weren't set up yet. We'd only been in country for, I think, 2 days. Like, we had just finished all of our briefs. And our sister unit, which we were next door to when we were fragged out, they kind of took us under their wing. We shared a safe holding area, like where we put ordnance and stuff that we brought back. They got us set up with being able to get our bang and our C4, getting us set up with the jerv shop. Like, they really kind of took us in. It felt more like we were deployed with them than we were with our unit. So one of their team leaders came over and was like, hey, I got this mission. And he's talking to my team leader, and Bruce was like, yeah, Mary, go on the mission. I'm like, all right, man. So I grabbed my weapon, and my job was strictly to observe and see how they run and like what we're going to see. And nobody's telling me anything. I'm just like, okay, IED, let's go, do. And I get in the back, we drive out there, and it's a dead body. But the dude still has his clothes on. And he's been out in the sun for I think 3 days. So very bloated, very waxy. And we have to put a water bottle charge on it to blow his clothes off to make sure that there's nothing strapped to him. So we go out there, do it. I observe. We clean up. There's no IED, just some random dude that got offed by the insurgents. And we get back, and I walk in and put my weapon away in the weapon rack, and the supply girl was like, "Oh my God, was it really a dead body?" And I'm like, "What? Yeah, you all knew?" And they're like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, weren't you freaked out? What was it like?" I'm like, "What? No, it was just a dead body. We just blew its clothes off. There was nothing wrong with it. Just a body." She's like, "Oh my God, how come you're not freaking out right now?" I'm like, "Listen, if he got up and started talking to me, yeah, then I'd be a little freaking freaked out. But he didn't, and he wasn't, so we're good." And she's like, "Well, how can you not care?" I'm like, "If I gave a place in my heart for every dead person I'm going to see in war, I would go crazy. Right. I can't afford to do that. Nobody can afford to do that." And I look over, and the other team leader hands Bruce a 5. I'm like, "You bet." And Bruce is like, "Yeah, I knew you could handle it. He thought you'd go crazy." I'm like, "Really? Like, I thought you knew me better."
So how much of those type of experiences do you think prepared you for what was next?
I don't think I would have handled it nearly as well if I hadn't have been with those guys for a year. Especially our security teams, 2-5 Cav, the ones we were with mostly. We became so close with them. Our team never had any issues with them. The other team, they butted heads a few times. But along with I kind of became the liaison with 2-5 because my husband at the time was supply for the battalion there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So actually our supply chick, we stopped using her and we just started going through my now ex-husband. Like anything we needed, just like, "Hey, we need this. Can you get us this?" And he would show up later that day, like, "Here you guys go." Like, "Hey man, thanks." And it really worked for us. Not for my marriage, because he was supply and I was EOD, and not only that, but he's battalion supply. So every single mission I'm going out with the security team. They go back to refit, and he's getting the "Tiller, you wouldn't believe the crazy shit your wife did today."
Well, what sort of crazy stuff were they referring to?
Mostly like we were getting shot at a lot. We had bounties on all of our heads at the time because EOD medics and Blackhawks, they wanted us all dead. So we would get a lot of come-alongs, and then snipers would try to pick us up, or you'd get like 4 or 5 dudes that would just spray and pray in our direction. And after a while, you kind of, like after the first time, like I was sitting in the back, we had a dude got shot, one of the Iraqi armies. Poor dude got shot in the ass too. So the medic's working on him on the ground. We have an IED right there before we have to clear it before we can call medevac. So I'm running the problem. I run down. I'm doing my job, and I hear this tink, tink. And I'm like, "What is that sound?" And they're like, "We're getting shot at." I'm like, "Oh." And I just went back to my job. Finished, cleared, "Hey, it's just garbage." They're like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm sure. It's garbage. Call the medevac." And so they call him back, and, we get him medevaced out. He's fine. The medic did a fantastic job. He ended up walking again. And then after that, the guys are just like, "Well, I know you can handle yourself in a firefight." I'm like, "It wasn't really a firefight. I was in the truck. I mean, I'm sorry, at 5.56 rounds, I'm not going through this."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there was a lot of little bits like that. And I learned that I could handle stuff, but also the guys around me learned that I could handle it. And because of that, we ended up building up a lot of trust. There was never any question "Oh, are you sure we should send the girl out there?"
So as this deployment continues and everything starts to pick up, let's fast forward to November 4th, 2007. How long had you been on deployment at this point in time?
11 months and 4 days.
Okay.
We got there on New Year's.
All right. So you were.
I was studying for the E5 board because it was part of becoming a team leader as I had to get promoted. Mm-hmm. And I had put it off as long as they would let me. And finally, the first sergeant was like, "You're going to the E5 board. You're going next month. So start studying." So I was studying for it. You know, I had my little folder of AR-whatevers. And we got called for an IED right outside of the children's school in Abu Ghraib. And that was a very common occurrence. We were clearing that school of IEDs probably twice a week. The insurgents very much did not want kids going to school, especially because they were letting little girls go to school.
Right.
So we were always out there, and it just seemed like no, we're doing this again. You know, it was one of the more regular missions we had as far as IEDs go. So we got there. The thing was, it wasn't an IED that was in the school. It was an IED that the Iraqi army had found and driven around with it in the back of their truck.
Well, that seems like a good idea.
We told them to bring it to Constitution. Oh, God, it's so dumb.
How very Iraqi of them.
What they did, we're like, "You what?"
Yeah.
Well, we told them to take it to Constitution. It was the Iraqi little cop that was attached to Liberty Victory, but it had a disposal site on it. So go to your base, drop it off there. We'll blow it up. Day is done. But no. So they drove it to the parking lot in between the school and what we call the Taliban apartments, because they would put IEDs in the school. We would come to work with them. The Taliban would try to ambush us. That happened pretty regularly. So we had to drive in back, like we had to kind of weave between the apartment buildings. So the whole time we're feeling like this is a trap. Like, why is the Iraqi army boxing us in back here? Like, we're all over the radios, like, "Hey, head on a swivel." Like, something is not right here. And where they put it was like right in this little parking lot, right in between. There's no safe distance that we can blow this thing up. Like, legally, we could have just blown it up right there. It's war, whatever. You know, we're not breaking any laws if we do that. Morally and ethically, we're not going to do that because we're probably going to shatter these people's windows. You know, if we don't frag any of them, you know, like, there's just.
What kind of round was it?
It's too high risk. It wasn't a round. It was they had cut down one of their light poles, probably about 3 feet high, and they filled it with ammonium nitrate.
Oh, okay.
And then,
so it wasn't like a 155 round or anything like that.
No, they had built this.
Okay.
And the really ballsy thing is they fed the fuse up through the bottom and put a lug nut, essentially, in the bottom to keep it there. And those bastards welded it. Like, they had to have done that after the fuse was in there. That is gutsy and dumb, but gutsy.
Can you just explain for the audience a little bit further the danger and all that so they understand?
Okay, so a blasting cap is the most sensitive part of most explosives. You don't want to mess with it at all. You definitely don't want to introduce fire to it. So what they did essentially was get really lucky welding this cap in there to where we couldn't get it out from the bottom. We had to dig down to it through the explosives. What we didn't know at the time was that it had a very sensitive kicker charge in the bottom. Because from what we saw, it was just more ammonium nitrate, which is not, it's not a safe explosive. It's homemade. But at this point, we've worked with it so much, we understand it.
Okay.
So we're not particularly worried about that. So my team leader went down, and this was kind of the way we would operate. He would go down, inspect the device, make sure everything's kosher, and then call me down and have me run the problem. as part of the whole on-the-job training for team leader.
Gotcha.
And it was also checking off a lot of my certificates to become, or certifications, sorry, to become a team leader. So he goes down there, hollers at me. He's like waving, but I couldn't hear him because the truck's loud. I've got my earplugs in, so I pop him out and I'm like, hey, what? And he's like, bring me trash bags. I'm like, okay. And I hop down out of the truck and I put my earplugs on the seat like an idiot. And I left them there. So I went and grabbed trash bags, run back down to Bruce the first time. And we start just taking handfuls of this stuff out of this device. It was probably about 2.5, 3 feet tall. So we're just scooping out handfuls of this explosive into this trash bag. I run the bag back up to Mick, who's still he was being trunk monkey in our truck, which basically he's prepping the charges. He's making sure everything is safe in there. He's getting ready for any sort of secondary missions. He is the tech guy.
Okay.
We're just doing stuff. He's making sure we're prepared to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I run the bag back to him. He puts it next with all the other explosives in our bang box. I run back down, grab the cap, bring that back to Bruce. Like, you do all stuff separately, because if one goes off, only one goes off. You put them all together, you're having a really bad day.
Right.
So I bring the cap back to Mick. He puts it in the cat pig. The cat pig is just a metal container with a bunch of styrofoam inside that keeps it from moving around. But if the cap goes off inside that, you won't know until you open it. It's like Schrodinger's cat in there.
So just let me understand this visually. So you're talking about the blasting cap that was welded to the bottom of this tube or whatever it was. You were able to separate that and put it in its own container.
Yeah, because only the lug nut was welded to the base.
Okay.
So we couldn't pull it out from the bottom. That's why we had to dig the explosives out to go to get to the cap from the top. So because we are not going to drive back with a full up IED in our truck.
Right. So
that's just stupid.
You're getting all the explosives out, putting them in bags. You get the blasting cap out. You put that inside the blast pig or whatever it was called. I'm sorry. Did I get that right? Blast pig? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So
cat pig, but yeah.
Cat pig. Sorry. So all this is done. What happens next?
Yep. I go back down, I grab the device, threw it up on my shoulder. And by this time, like I said, we've been working with 2.5 for a while. We've got banter. There's at no point are we ever uncomfortable with these dudes. I've peed on the side of the road in front of them. We're all cool. And one of them was joking with Mick, because Mick's a big dude. And they were like, "You're going to let that little girl carry that big ass bomb, huh?" And he's like, "She's got it." And I'm over there flipping them off hey, And so I bring it back to the truck and I lay it down in the back of the truck. And when I had thrown it up on my shoulder, my weapon was slung, and just the momentum kind of carried my weapon up and over my shoulder, and it kind of came up over my collar. So the sling was choking me just a little bit. It was just uncomfortable. And for anybody who's like, "You're supposed to be wearing a neck guard," I was. I had ironically strapped it to my crotch because that was all I needed instead of that giant crotch plate. Okay, makes sense. So it wasn't on my neck. Yeah, it was a joke, and I ran with it the whole deployment. So I was being choked a bit. So after I laid the device down, I kind of, I reached back to grab my weapon and adjust it. And when I looked back up, it was rocking. And the last thing I remember was thinking no, but not, I wasn't panicked or anything. It was more no, you don't. And I grabbed it and it detonated. So wait, explain this again. When you said it was rocking or locking? Rocking, teetering back and forth. Okay. What we've surmised happened was there are two runners in the back of the truck that the turret slides back and forth on. Mm-hmm. And where I had placed it was in between our robot box and one of the runners. The gap wasn't big enough, so it was kind of balanced on the runner. So what we think happened was, because it had a super sensitive kicker charge, when it hit the bottom of the lip, the edge off the runner, it cooked off. I just wasn't fast enough. If I had grabbed it before that had happened, it wouldn't have happened. Although it probably would have happened when we went through the gate.
So, like, we're talking a matter of seconds here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're seeing this thing rock, and you know what the end result is when you see this thing rocking and the ability of what's going to happen. What's going through your mind in that instant? You said, no, you don't, but like, what else are you thinking? Anything?
Yeah, well, it's hard to describe. There's a million things that went through my head at once. And like, my medic told me that I attempted to close one of the doors and bear hug it at the same time. So I was obviously trying to contain the blast, but I tried to wrap my body around it. So, like, in that moment, I fully thought that I was going to die, but maybe Mick wouldn't. Like, that was it. Like, I didn't give a shit if I died. That was pretty much what I thought was going to happen. But I had promised Mick's wife that I would bring him home. And that's what I cared about. Like, I've got Mick in front of me in the truck. I've got the security guys directly behind me. Bruce is right behind me. If I die, I die. As long as they don't.
Give me a sense of how big this explosion was. If you don't bear hug this thing, what's the extent of the damage?
Well, because of where it was, and this, like I said, like, this is not something that when I initially did it, it wasn't like I planned out what was going to happen if I didn't do this. But because of where it was and the proximity to the bag of explosives we had just put in there,
right,
it sympathetically detonated that, which sympathetically detonated the rest of the explosives.
So everything ended up going.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But we got really, really lucky because we made a series of bad decisions. When Bruce and I got out of the truck, both of us left our doors open. We never do that. I don't know why we did that, but we did. We left the doors open. The turret was open. The back door was open. So when it detonated, the blast channeled out and around, and it didn't just turn Mick into a pink mist. But it also kind of funneled the blast directly into my chest, which threw me about 15 feet into the Humvee behind me, which was also very lucky because that was my medic's Humvee.
Well, if you're going to get thrown into a Humvee 15 feet after an explosion, I guess that's the one you want to land on.
You're right. And it rung my bell pretty good. Like, everything was like coming back into focus. And it was like being inside a church bell as it's ringing. And you hear it, but you're not sure if you hear it or if you feel it. Like, the rattle is in your bones. And I remember hearing this woman screaming and screaming. And I legitimately had the thought, like, someone shut that bitch up. And then I took a breath and the screaming stopped. And I was like, oh, shit, that's me. Sorry.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just, the levity where you're, oh, wait, that's me. Sorry.
Like, oh. And then I heard someone next to me, and it was Bruce. He was like, Mary, are you okay? And I was like, Bruce, are you okay? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, where's Mick? Because Mick was in the truck. And I legitimately thought I killed him. It was easily the scariest moment of my life. Was thinking that I wasn't fast enough and Mick died because of it.
Well, where was Mick?
But I was wrong. Mick was fine. Okay. Mick flew out of the truck after me and had a tourniquet on my arm before anybody even knew I was hurt. And then my medic got there. He put the tourniquet on the other arm. And I was... He's like, Mick's right here. He's fine. I'm like, okay, well, what about? And he's like, Mary, shut up. It's just you. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, so you're awake to this whole thing. Are you aware of the situation with your arms at this point? Like, are you doing a bodily inventory?
I'm not looking down. I'm very consciously not looking down.
You thought you lost your legs?
I closed my eyes. No, I just didn't want to see any damage done so that I wouldn't go into shock.
Okay.
Like, I can handle pain, but if I see my blood leave my body, that's my life force, man.
Did you know you were messed up? Like you could tell, like, hey, something's definitively wrong. I just don't want to look at it.
Kind of, like, in my head, I was talking myself down. So in my head, I was like, it's okay. Just rung my bell. I'm going to be fine. Like, just don't look down. I'm going to be fine. Just stay calm. Everybody's fine. Like, as soon as they told me everybody else was fine, I was like, okay, then I can just focus on I'm okay. But at one point, my medic, Nick, sorry, that's going to be confusing. My medic's name is Nick with an N. Right. And my teammate's name was Mick with an M, like
Mary.
M.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So Mick, whose life you made sure you were saving, was fine. Your medic, Nick, was tending to you.
Yes.
Okay.
So at one point, he tells this kid, like, expose her, cut her clothes off, have to find out where she's bleeding from. Like, Nick was straight. He was straight with me. He's like, there's too much blood. I don't know where you're bleeding from. I have to cut your clothes off. And I was like, do it, man. So I hear this kid, like, hesitate, and then Nick snapped. And he was like, if she was a dude, you already would have done it. And so this kid just like, and like starts cutting my clothes off. And I'm laying there, and I feel the scissors go underneath my underwear strap. I hear Bruce go, dude, you don't got to cut those off. And I started giggling.
Are you serious? Like, this is the kind of thing that's going on in this moment?
I'm laying there giggling, and then I'm like, oh, God, it hurts to laugh. Please make me laugh, guys. They go to take my vest off, and Nick was like, I need you to sit up. And I'm like, okay. So I sit up, and they take it off. And in my head, I was like, that was way too fast. And I was like, no, it's just because it rung my bell. Time means nothing right now. Don't focus on that. I'm fine. I'm breathing. And he lays me back down. He's like, okay, we got a medevac coming. We have to put you on the hardboard. And I'm like, all right. So like, I tried to roll to one side so they could get it under me. I have no idea if I helped at all. But they put me on this thing. They put me on the Humvee, and they're driving there. Nick's with me the whole time. And I remember at one point he's like, I just gave you morphine. And I was like, fuck, thank you. Like, I appreciate it. Like, but he just sat there talking to me. Like, him and Bruce really kept my head in the game. So they get to the medevac, and they put me on, and I was like, Bruce, like, where's Bruce? And I'm like, he's right here. And I was like, dude, I'm going to be okay. And he was like, I know. And I was like, no, dude, I am going to be okay. Like, I didn't want them to worry. You know, I knew if I'm getting medevaced out like that, it's bad. I don't want them to dwell on it, and I don't want them worrying that I'm going to die. So they strap me in, and we're flying, and the whole time in my head, I'm just repeating the phrase over and over in my head: stay awake, don't go to sleep, don't die. Just stay awake, don't go to sleep, don't die. And at one point, the crew chief comes over, and he's like, hey, are you okay? And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck do you want from me? A thumbs up? Sure, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm strapped down in here, man. So we get to the cache, the combat support hospital, for anybody who doesn't know. And they get me off the bird, and I hear a doctor. And it was pretty typical that people over there called me Mary because my last name looks weird and nobody knows how to pronounce it. So I get down there, he's like, okay, Mary, we've got you. You're going to be okay. And I was like, all right. And that's when I went to sleep.
But at this point, you have no idea that any part of your arms are missing.
No. I mean, I kind of had a feeling, but I'm ignoring that feeling.
Okay.
So I hadn't seen it. My eyes have been covered since Nick got to me. Like, I don't have any definitive proof.
Gotcha. Okay. They covered your eyes for your own sake, or is that just kind of like a standard procedure given, were you bleeding from the face as well?
It's pretty standard. No, I mean, I was. I mean, my face was pretty tore up. But it's standard procedure to cover someone's eyes because if they look down and they see their problems, they could go from calm to in shock and hysterical.
Right.
And that will kill them faster. And I'd known that. just because I'd been through like 2 or 3 CLS courses, and that was one thing I always remembered, like, just don't look down. Okay. And so, they were, if I had had any other medic, I don't think I would have lived. If Mick hadn't flown out after me, I wouldn't have lived. The medevac got to me in 14 and a half minutes. If that hadn't happened, I probably would have died.
Just from loss of blood?
Just, yeah.
Okay.
Because I started bleeding fast. The good news was I was really, really healthy when I was deployed. Like, I didn't drink soda. I will say I drank a lot of energy drinks, when we're out like 2 a.m. because I'm not brewing a pot of coffee in my truck. But that's like the worst it got. Like, I didn't eat anything bad. They actually kind of made fun of me for being so healthy. And that probably put a little something into my survivability.
Sure.
So no, the first time I realized was in Germany.
Okay, I was going to ask you, when you wake up in the hospital, obviously you're in launch school in Germany. What do you see? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
They had me in a bed, and like when I woke up, like I immediately knew I was in a hospital before I opened my eyes because I could smell it. My mom was a nurse forever, so hospitals all have the same kind of sterile smell. So I recognized that, and I kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and I looked over, and my ex-husband was sitting next to me. And he hadn't seen that I was awake yet. And I was covered up to my shoulders, in the white hospital blanket. And I remember being like, I am cold. And I looked down and I lift up my left arm underneath the blanket and I was like, oh, that one's gone. And I looked at my right arm and I lift out and I'm like, oh, fuck, it's even shorter. And I look over at Jared, my ex, and I was like, is everybody okay? And he's like, what? I'm like, is everybody okay? Everybody else, Nick and Bruce? And he's like, yeah, no, everybody's fine. It's just you. And I'm like, okay, then I'm all right. I'm like, I knew I was going to have to deal with a lot, recovery, but in that moment, I didn't care. Everything was going to be fine because everybody was alive. And that was my ultimate goal in that whole disaster, was that everybody survived.
When you realize the magnitude of what's happened to you, is there a point where you get overwhelmed with emotion? I mean, obviously you're not a crier, so it's not in your nature.
Oh, yeah.
But
I remember the moment it broke me.
Okay, tell me about that.
I was in the hospital. It was 10 days after I had been blown up. And I'm laying in the bed, and my family is there by this point. And I'm in Brooke Army Medical Center down in Fort Sam Houston, Texas.
Okay, so you had left Germany pretty quickly then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I left, I think, within 24 hours. And then when I got to Fort Sam, they unloaded me. And as I was wheeling in, they've got a doctor there who kind of briefs you like, hey, his name was Kirk, and I was super high on drugs. He was a major. You're going to be here doing surgeries. You're probably going to have a few infections. You're probably going to be in the hospital for 6 to 8 months. And I was like, okay, no, I'm not. He's like, well, the explosive that hit you was homemade and those tend to be pretty dirty. And I was like, Doc, don't lecture me on explosives.
Right. I'm the pro with the explosives, right?
Right. And he's like, well, you're going to have a lot of infections. And I looked at him and I was like, Doc, there is no way in hell that I'm going to be in this hospital for 6 to 8 months. And I don't think he thought I was right. I think he just didn't want to argue with me anymore. And so he was like, okay. And he kept calling me Sergeant. And I was like, just call me Mary. Like, nobody called me Sergeant at that time. It was like, it's just Mary. And so wheels me in, and day 10, I'm laying in bed after actually, I don't think I'd had a surgery yet. I think that was one of my down days. And my sister leans over and she's like, Mary, you look bloated, really bloated. And my mom was like, yeah, honey, I was gonna say something. Like, when's the last time you took a shit? And I'm like, right before the incident, and everybody loses their minds. Like, well, it's been 10 days. You're going to go septic. Run. And like my mom is flipping through the chart. Like, how has nobody noticed this? And I'm sitting there like, can everybody just calm down? I feel fine. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to pump you full of laxatives. So they do. And then they shove a bedpan under me. I don't know if you've ever tried to go to the bathroom in a bedpan.
No, I haven't.
It is awful.
You couldn't just get up and go?
No, well, they didn't want me to. They didn't want me out of bed.
Gotcha.
And so, like, I tried. I tried for like 2 hours. And finally I was like, I'm just going to go use that bathroom. And they're like, you can't. I'm like, I can. And either you're going to get me one of those little rolly stands for all my lines, or I'm ripping these shits out. But this whole going in the bed thing, it's not working for me.
Right.
And they're like, okay. And so my nubs are all bandaged. And they get me one of the wheelie IV line things, the little stand. And they bring me into the bathroom, sit me down, leave the room. I do my deed. And then I turn around and flush, and I reach for the toilet paper, and I'm like, oh God.
Help.
And like both my nubs are bandaged. I'm like, how am I supposed to wipe? Like I'm 23 years old at this point. I don't get me wrong. I fully intended when I was like 85, 90 to be in the old folks home, like, get in here and wipe my ass. Now I'm 23. You know, I was a very independent person.
Right.
I'm sitting on the toilet and I'm freaking out. I'm trying to think of everything I can possibly think of. And I've got nothing. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And I start crying. And my ex like peeks his head and he's like, hey, you done? Like immediately like comes and just always like, what's wrong? And it must have taken me 10 more minutes just to vocalize it. But I had to ask him to wipe my ass.
Wow.
And that was probably the single most degrading moment of my life. Like that's when I broke. And I went back to my bed and I cried and I just slept for the rest of the day. And then the next day I was like, okay, I am going to learn how to do that on my own. But for now, focus on shit I can control. But I had days like that a few times where I just couldn't get something. And I had to, man, recovering from losing limbs it's an exercise in how often you can swallow your pride and still feel like a human.
That is incredibly eloquently stated. I've never heard anybody, and we've talked to plenty of amputees on the podcast. I've never heard anybody state it that way. And it makes total sense. Like it's for somebody who is fortunate enough to have all four limbs after combat. I understand that feeling. I understand what you're going through in doing that. And it's similar, I guess. And, you know, I'm not sure how much PTSD you've had to deal with, but I think it's a similar feeling to what PTSD is, that you have to be willing to swallow your pride. One, to say, okay, I'm struggling. And two, you know, I'm struggling and I admit that I don't feel normal, but I have to find normal again. Like, I think, is that fair? Is it fair to equate it that way? Yeah.
Yeah. It's, it's going to change from person to person. I will say becoming an amputee it's like being drunk all the time. Not because you feel drunk or anything, but it's a person answer. If you were an asshole before your amputations, you're probably a bigger asshole. If you were a nice, fun person who liked to laugh, you're probably going to laugh a whole lot more because you got way more jokes now. It's very much an inhibitor.
Right. Okay.
As far as like trying to shut your emotions down, because that's what we normally do in the military. Like,
well, it's what we're coached. It's what we're taught. Robots. Yeah. I mean, it's just continue mission. You know, you just keep pushing forward. So you live with this new reality now, and when is there a point where you start to be able to say, okay, I want to try to do X, Y, and Z on my own?
Pretty much right away. Like one of the first things I did, they let me out of the bed before I went to the bathroom. On, I think it was the third day, I was laying there and they were like, "Hey, you want to do anything?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to go look out the window." And they were like, "What?" I'm like, I want to get up and go look out the window. And the problem they had with that is that normally, you know, they'll have somebody there kind of holding you under your armpits, but they couldn't touch anywhere on my arms because everything's super sensitive and just destroyed right at that moment. So one of the nurses was awesome. He was like, "Oh, I've got an idea," and like runs off and gets a belt for a gi, like a karate gi. Mm-hmm. So it's like a stiff cotton belt. And he wraps it around my waist and he's holding onto that. And he walked me to the window and he's like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I just want to see America." Like, this is what I fought for. And it was this weird, it was such a weird emotion because I'm looking down at traffic in San Antonio. It looks right over I-10, which is jam-packed. And I have this idea, like there's a dude down there who is in the fit of road rage. He's pissed off about his day. And he doesn't realize how good his bad day is. And I had this realization that I went to war in another country so that war would never touch my home and it would never change it. And it didn't. My home didn't change, but I did. And it was weird to see that life just went on no matter what we were doing. It's an odd perspective to have. Not one I ever thought I would get from war.
Sure. No, I mean, it's, I could certainly relate to that. When I first got back from my first deployment, there were a lot of things that I used to get upset about that I just stopped getting upset about because the perspective of everything changes.
Yeah. Like all of a sudden it doesn't matter. And oh, by the way, I don't like pork barbecue anymore because it smells like charred people. Like, it's weird things that change about you. But after seeing that was the moment. I'm like, I don't want to be broken on top of being broken. Like, I didn't want to spend my life as a burden, especially not on my husband at the time or my parents or, you know, the people I love the most. So very quickly I started asking to try to do stuff on my own. Probably a year and a half in.
So,
go ahead.
But how long did you end up spending in the hospital and how many surgeries did you have?
I want to say like maybe a dozen, like between 10 and 12 surgeries. But I was out of the hospital in 14 days.
So much for 6 to 8 months, eh?
Right. And then when my doctor came in, he's the one that told me, Dr. Kirk, like, he comes in, he's like, "Hey, Mary." And I was like, "Hey, sir." And he's like, "So, I don't know how, but you can leave." And I was like, "I told you." He's like, "Not today. We're going to finish your processing and stuff today, but you can leave tomorrow." I'm like, awesome. And I had a couple like times where I had to go back into the ER because like I had fallen and tried to catch myself just instinctively, but oh yeah, no hands. Or just the pain got to be too much because in the beginning my nerves were going nuts. But yeah, that was the last time I think I was admitted to a hospital for any extent of time. So
let me ask you about the guys in your unit. When do you see or hear from them again?
So the first time I heard from Bruce, I was in the hospital in Brook Army, probably 3 or 4 days after I got there. So maybe a week after the blast. And Bruce, we were talking. He goes, "Hey, you know, you jinxed yourself, right?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, we had a conversation. We were just shooting the shit in one of the pits one day, and we got to talking about amputations. And Mick was like, 'Man, I couldn't lose a leg.' I'm like, 'You know, I could lose a leg. They have some pretty kick-ass prosthetic legs. As soon as my arms came over, just pull the plug, man.' And Bruce like reminded me of that. And I'm like, oh man, you know what would be awful? If my arm just like spontaneously grew back, just pull the plug. And he's like, yeah, Mary, it doesn't work like that. I'm like, I can try. But Mick didn't talk to me until we got home.
Why?
And he thought I was mad at him. It was survivor's guilt. He thought I should be mad at him because he thought he should have been the one carrying it because he was the big dude. And I was upset with him when he told me that. I'm like, dude, no, under no circumstances. Number one, I was a senior team member. I was being groomed. It was my job. I was the last tech in positive control of that device. No matter what else happened, that stands. So whatever happened to that device from that point on is on me. Nobody else. Nobody.
Is that something you're taught in school? As far as when you talk
like
about the positive
unit.
control. Okay. So it's a unit kind of thing. Well, and
yeah.
I wanted to ask you this before. I think we just kind of got sidetracked, but how much do you blame yourself for that device going off?
Well, in the beginning, a lot more, because I thought I must have done something to it. We didn't know about the kicker charge until a few months later when the SEXY report came back. SEXY is a combined explosives exploitation cell.
Okay.
They are the forensic side of EOD. I got to work with them for a little bit in Iraq. So when I got hit, they took it very personally, and my best friend in the unit ended up hand locking everything through SEXY because he was working there at the time.
And so what did you learn from the report?
We learned that we were targeted. It had a very sensitive charge in the bottom. And if we had driven through the gate with that IED in our truck, it would have detonated as we went through, simply because of all the potholes. If it had bounced even a little bit, we would have died.
Did it make you feel any better that it happened then at that moment where there's, I guess, less collateral damage that could have been done? Okay.
Oh yeah. No, like I'm able to compartmentalize and think about things logically. And, as much as my overactive Jiminy Cricket would like to take responsibility for something like that, I can absolutely see the benefit of it happening the way it did. Because if we had gone through the gate with all of our doors closed, with the turret button down, all of us inside, and that thing detonated the way it did,
would have killed everybody.
I'm sorry, did it cut out?
No, it would have killed everybody.
Yeah, we all would have pink mist. If not, it would have liquefied our brains and we'd be humans and vegetables. Like the way it happened is probably the best case scenario, aside from us dipping it right there and everything being perfect.
Right. Well, and again, for those who aren't familiar, if an explosion happens in an enclosed space, the pressure is magnified because there's nowhere for the explosion to go. And you talked about before, the doors were open, the trunk was open, and so the blast had areas to go out, and it actually causes less damage than would it have been in a small confined space. So to that end, there is a certain amount of as you said, worst case scenario possible. And well, for you personally, obviously it was, do you consider it?
For me personally, I totally thought I was going to die. So keeping, staying alive and everybody else is alive, and I just gave my arms for them to live. No, I'll totally take that. That's fine.
Okay.
It's my quality of life is not bad. I've got a great life, and I've still managed to save lives and help people. And it's losing my arms, having people be able to visibly see my struggle has made it so that I can help a lot more people. Don't get me wrong. I would have stayed in EOD for life. I love that job, but I'm not helpless, and I'm not somebody who can't help other people in society.
Right.
This just gave me a different path to do that.
Okay, so let's talk about life without any arms, because listeners want to know this stuff. Most difficult thing you have to deal with of everyday life with no arms. Is it going to the bathroom?
Oh, no. I've got that pretty much down. Well,
eating?
It depends. So if I'm traveling, I have to wear like elastic pants. Like I found these things called dress pant yoga pants. They're a godsend. But they look like fancy pants, but they're yoga pants. But I have to carry a hook and a couple C-clamps and a piece of wood with me that I set up in a bathroom as best I can to take my pants down so that I can go to the bathroom by myself.
Gotcha.
But that's as in-depth as that gets. And there has been a couple times where there's no place for me to set it up. And I've had to swallow my pride and just ask a rando, like, hey, sorry, I really can you help me take my pants off? And then they look at me crazy for a minute. I'm like, I just can't, you don't have to stay in there. I'll do all the rest. I just did pants off, pants up. And yeah, I hate that part. I will hold it for a day before I do that, but man. I still had to do it.
What's it like eating every day?
I've got a strap that's it's a little Velcro strap, goes around my nub, and I can fit a fork or a spoon in it. Mm-hmm. And then I just like if I'm by myself and I've got like a piece of chicken or a steak or something, I'm not gonna lie, I just stab that thing and take bites out of it. I'm not cutting it up all dainty. But if I'm at a restaurant or something, I'll be like, hey, can you ask them to please cut it up before you bring it out?
Right.
And
sure.
It's just one little thing. And normally the waitress is like, oh yeah, no, totally. Like they catch on real quick.
Sure. Yeah. What about sort of anything else? I mean, is there stuff that you used to do before? Tennis, volleyball, whatever that involves.
Oh, volleyball. I have a volleyball tattoo.
Really?
It's on the small of my back. I got it the year before Wedding Crashers came out and dubbed it a tramp stamp.
Oh, yeah.
Like my life.
Okay.
And I drew it. Well, me and my friend Wallace drew it, and it looks strangely like a target. Awesome.
Yeah. May as well be a bullseye, right?
May as well.
But I mean, like, are there things that you want to do physically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I miss volleyball. I loved it. I brought a volleyball with me to Iraq, and I even had a mini volleyball in the truck that I would just kind of have as like almost like a stress ball. I would just palm it and play with it when we were doing nothing. I miss that. Video games were rough. It took me, I think it was a year and a half before I tried, and now I can play. I play with my feet, but that was there's still some games that I can't play because the buttons are too involved, like World of Warcraft. Mm-hmm. I've never played it because there's just way too much you got to do, and keyboard and mouse. I'm not fast enough with things like that, and man, those nerves are vicious if you suck. So learning to play video games is big because that was kind of my dad and my thing.
Right.
I was playing video games before I could read. He always played with me, so that was one thing I really wanted to get back.
Sure.
Driving was a bit of a curve, and I still get super anxious every time I have to drive because my biggest fear is getting into an accident, and like headline is like armless woman kills family of 5, and then everybody's like, why was she even on the road? Like, oh God. Right. Yeah. It's anxiety I don't really need, but if I got to do it, I will.
How are you talking on the phone to me right now?
Oh, I'm holding it between my stump and my ear.
Really?
Oh, I got pretty good. Yeah.
So it
takes me a minute to get it situated, and then
can you dial with your stump?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I'm in a car, though, I tend to use my nose because it's more accurate.
I am envisioning, but you know what's funny, Mary, is I'm envisioning someone who is completely adept at what you have to do. Like none of this is a struggle for you at this point.
It's not. Like it's stuff that was very much a struggle in the beginning, but is not anymore. I think the biggest problem I have to like my day to day is like washing my hair because I can't reach the top of my head.
Right.
So I have to bend over and do it with my knee. And man, I'm almost 35. My back is not going to last that long, much longer. I'm not going to be able to stretch like that.
So what are you doing now to help other vets?
I run a few things, work with a few people. I do a lot with Drinkin' Bros, which is mostly a social media based platform, but everybody gets together. But the one group that I am ridiculously proud of, like I'm dubbed the Queen of Nerds for, like, we have a million subchapters. But Nerds it's my baby. I'm not the one who started it, but I'm like the owner of it. But that's not the group I'm really proud of. The one I'm really, really proud of is Vigilant Guard. And it's not just veterans, it's civilians too. But it's veterans, Leos, EMTs, and any sort of first responder. Vigilant Guard has kind of taken up this mission to be there for people who are suicidal. Any sort of depression, anxiety, mental health disorders. We've got people that are psychologists. We've got people who've been trained to answer the phones, like my brain is failing me. Like a suicide hotline. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of it. But they do that crisis response. So we have an entire group dedicated to that, and they have saved a lot of lives. I'm so proud of them. And then I do some work with Wounded Wear. And then it became the Combat Wounded Coalition.
Okay.
And do you know who Jason Redman is?
Yes. Jason Redman was just on the Hazard Ground podcast.
Oh, perfect. It's him. I work with him.
Oh.
Everything he does, he's like, Mary, come do this. I'm like, all right, man, I'm on my way.
That's awesome.
I love that dude.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
He can do no wrong. Oh, he's fantastic. And then I do some work with stackup.org. They are a veteran gaming charity.
Oh, wow.
So they send, and it's not just veterans, they send consoles and games and stuff overseas to guys who are deployed. And they even do this one program where if you're deployed and you got a kid who wants to play video games with you, they'll send you a set and then send your kid a matching set so you guys can still play video games together.
Interesting.
But they also, and they also do this kind of reintegration program called Air Assault, where they take just deserving veterans or even active duty guys, and they take them out to like Comic-Con or GameCon or E3, just big events that it's filled with nerds, and you're there with a bunch of other veterans, so the crowd it's easier to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something to be said about going into a crowd and you're the only vet and going in with a bunch of other vets. A bunch of other vets.
Totally different.
Your whole dynamic changes. But they do a lot with adaptive gaming. Dave Krause is one of their main guys. He's an EOD tech as well. Marine, he lost his left hand and his left eye they had a bad RSP, or actually it was a nerding. They were a nerding ordnance, so taking the explosives out. Only the Marines do that. It's kind of like only Navy does underwater stuff. Mm-hmm. Marines are the only ones who do in nerding. It's very technical, very, very dangerous. But that's how he lost his eye and his arm. And then, I'm just kind of there. I try to be positive. I do a bunch of like motivational speaking and stuff.
Right.
But I don't feel like that helps as much as just being there for people. And I have a public page, like a Facebook page. I try really, really hard not to get political on it, but there's been a couple things that I've been like, I have to. But that's I try not to get political. I try to just be positive and show people like, hey, yeah, on the surface, it looks like this really sucks. And sometimes, it does. But if you can make it funny, even a little bit, you can get through it.
Any regrets?
Wish it was faster.
Wish you were faster, yeah.
But yeah, no, other than that, no. I've had people like, oh, I bet you wish you never joined the military. Like, no, I've had an amazing experience. I've got brothers that I'll have for my whole life. The EOD community is like a second family.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine my life had I not gone into the military.
Well, to that end, I mean, clearly you have learned to live a life that is fruitful, inspirational, and certainly one that, is beneficial to others. And from that standpoint, Mary, I mean, I don't know that you can be doing much more, even if you had 100% of both your arms. And look, I'm sure there are days that you miss them, and there are days you'd love to have them back. But I mean, clearly, you've learned to cope and move past that, and just live life to its fullest every day.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Well, listen, I mean, you have a great sense of humor, obviously, and you've learned to cope with whatever has been in front of you. And from, telling your story, it's clear to see that, even if you had both arms, whatever is in front of you, you'd approach with the same sense of humor and the same sense of positivity and the same sense of, hey, let's just knock this out and get it done, and make everything around us a little bit better. I mean, that's just kind of just the feeling I'm picking up on.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it was. I guess I am.
Well,
I'm just able to, have colorful hair now, which makes me happier.
Well, the Army doesn't like that, but civilian world, it's certainly A-okay. And I certainly appreciate you being so honest and sharing everything about your story and everything that you went through. And I hope it resonates well with others. But, Mary Dague, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And people, please don't fry the show because of the battered wife joke. I swear it was just a joke like 10 years ago.
At this point, after listening, I'm sure they've already forgotten it. So again, Mary Dague, thank you.
Not anymore.
Thank you for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.